Hello everyone, I am HISTORY11-CAMBAYA, BS Criminology 1B, and here is my reflection for the finals for the Torrentera and the Philippine History Source Book, and the mode of reflection that I am going to adapt for the first topic, which is the minutes of the proceedings on the national territory of the 1971 Constitutional Convention. The mode of reflection is microscope. Get one word or words, phrase, or sentence that struck you or affected you. What are its societal or sectoral implications? Why? My reflection. Ancestral home of the Filipino. This term originates from Article 1 of the Constitutional Conference that took place in 1972, which national territory would ultimately be decided upon by the written documentation. In my view, doing justice to both our nation and our land by defining national territory as the ancestral homes of Filipinos is the only way to go. Filipinos were the rightful owners of the Philippines since they had inhabited the nation for untold numbers of years, and because of our forefathers fought hard enough to earn this right. In addition, Section 2 stipulated that all the waters surrounding, between and connecting the various islands that make up the Philippine archipelago are considered necessary appurtenances of the land territory, and that these waters are considered to be a part of the inland or internal waters of the Philippines. This was true regardless of the width or dimensions of these waters. As a result, we may utilize this document as part of the argument against China's claim that it has sovereignty over islands that are clearly in our control. The next topic is the role of Islam in the history of the Filipino people, and the mode of reflection that I am adapted is the mirror. What is being discussed or read? Is there anything that you can see in yourself? Is it present or absent? What do you feel? Why? My reflection. This article is all about Islam, which had a significant impact on the customs and beliefs of the Filipino people, particularly prior to the Spanish colonization of the Philippines. Their culture had always been a part of the Filipinos, as shown by the fact that historical writings revealed that former rulers of the Philippines were referred to as sultans, datus, and other titles, and that throughout their lives they had been Muslims. My assumptions was that Islam would become the dominant religion in our country if the Spaniards had not arrived and introduced Christianity. According to the results of a census conducted in the Philippines in 1970, 96.7% of the population identified as Muslim. The census taken in the year 2021, on the other hand, revealed that more than 86% of the population has now been replaced by Catholics. It troubled me to think about it, but what if I had been born a Muslim? And if I were ever to be one of them, would I be good at following their customs and everything else? Next topic is the history of terrorism in the Philippines. And the mode of reflection that I am adapted is the telescope. Cite existing societal, local, national, or international issues. Then connect that issue to the topics being read or discussed. How these issues affected you as a student or as a youth. Why or why not? According to the article, the history of the terrorism began with the formation of communist organizations such as the CCP, CPP, and the NPA, and the NDF, supported by the MILF and MNLF, both of which to this day continue to harbor hopes of seizing huge areas of Islamic territory. MOA AD, which was ostensibly put into place in order to help with the dispute that comes between GRP and MILF. As time goes on, it turns out to become less effective than CAB as a result of the controversy around the possibility that it violates the Constitution or that it is unconstitutional. After that, the BBL was passed into law, which quickly became another source of contention due to its dubious effectiveness. As a student of criminology, this has an effect on me because I will one day be a law enforcement officer, and terrorist activity poses a threat to the country. As a young person, this is a concern of mine because we are the beneficiaries of the present. If there is a conflict between these armed groups and the government, it affects us in the sense that our actions will become manipulated if certain groups are successful in capturing the area which we live. This is a concern of mine because we are the beneficiaries of the present. The next topic is the agreement on peace between the government of the Republic of the Philippines and the Moro Islamic Liberation Front. The mode of reflection that I am adopted is the telescope. This article reveals the specifics of the peace accord reached between the GRP and the MILF. The government had offered agreements on various topics such as rehabilitation, ancestral domain, activation of committees, and their acknowledgement. These topics included security and safety concerns. It was plainly stated within this document that the government intends to negotiate an agreement with the MILF in order to secure peace in Mindanao. This was made explicit in both written and verbal form. It bothers me that other communist groups in the government are unable to communicate peacefully or without resorting to violence like the New People's Army or the NPA. There have been reports both nationally and locally that these groups have been actively recruiting other Filipinos and brainwashing them in order to get them to participate in insurgencies and rebel movements. As a student, this has an effect on me because to the fact that, much like in UP, students are the targets of the communist group. I'm baffled as to why these individuals, who are not merely students because they are intelligent and scholars, are convinced by this armed gang when it is abundantly evident that their intention is to inflict harm. And if they were to perish while fighting for that group, they will undoubtedly hold the government responsible for the bloodshed. The next topic is the report of the cholera epidemic in the Philippines. The mode of reflection that I am adopted is the telescope. Even though the COVID-19 pandemic was severe, it did not come close to the number of deaths that were caused by the cholera epidemic that occurred in the Philippines between 1902 and 1904. Cholera was responsible for a greater number of fatalities during this time period. Both diseases and viruses had a significant impact on the Filipino population as well. However, COVID-19 reached its pinnacle, and our movement had reached the point where we could effectively manipulate it to stop the future spread of this fatal virus. In addition to that, Filipino physicians from both time periods shown the same level of proficiency in combating these conditions. Death can be found in any location, which is what drives the specialists to develop an antidote that can treat those who are sick and make it so that they are completely cured. The Philippines had already conquered the cholera epidemic, and it is my sincere hope that we will also conquer COVID-19. As a student, I have been impacted by this sense. As a consequence of the lockdown, the classes that were intended to take place in person were instead held remotely. When I was younger and the government monitored everything I did, I remember feeling as though I was being suffocated since I couldn't do the things I wanted to do like I could in the good old days. For instance, playing in the street or in other facilities, going outside late at night, such as 7 o'clock, or going to multiple locations that are a significant distance apart. The next topic is the little Tokyo of the pre-war Philippines, and the mode of reflection is the microscope. Little Tokyo, Gianga Municipal District in Mental was destroyed during the war. This is only one of the several unintended consequences that can result from the outbreak of war. In the same way that it had happened in Russia and Ukraine, massive amounts of infrastructure had been destroyed. The number of deaths among the population was rising, and the economy, both locally and internationally, had been negatively impacted. In the year 2022, prices for both gasoline and diesel will reach their highest point, and if the cost of gasoline goes up, so will the rates and are charged for rides on tricycle, buses, vans, and any other public or private vehicles. In similar vein, inflation in the cost of food is occurring. This should serve as a reminder to all nations that a single choice can have far-reaching consequences for the entire world. Therefore, coming to an agreement or engaging in peace or peace talks is a much preferably option to opting for violence over the lives of innocent people that have been lost and other potential consequences of war. Next is the Philippine History Source Book. The first topic is the Sergio Osmeña State of the Nation Address, June 9, 1945. And the mode of reflection that I am adapted is the microscope. Only in unity can there be strength. This remark was made by His Excellency Sergio Osmeña, who served as President of the Philippines for a period of time in the past. It is relevant to both our nation and the individuals who live here in general. Insurgencies, violent uprisings, and possibly even war could break out in the Philippines if the country were adopt a decentralized form of governance. Since the strength of our country comes from the strength of its people, if there is anarchy, it will be less able to defend itself. Because of this, unity is of utmost importance when it comes to matters of administration. If the country is able to weaken defense, it will also be exposed to the other weaknesses and foreign issues. It will lead to an imbalanced distribution of power, which will ultimately result in the collapse of the Philippines. Next topic is the 1973 Constitution of the Republic of the Philippines. And the mode of reflection that I am adopted is the microscope. Bill of Rights. This clause was included in the Constitution of the Republic of the Philippines, which was ratified in 1973. Since the constitutional rights were elevated to the status of fundamental law, the Bill of Rights was never overturned and continues to be inviolable. This list of rights must be read to people who have been apprehended by us, the future law enforcement officers. It is important not to forget to say, because doing so could lead the case to the dismiss. In addition, the accused are protected by their constitutional rights from any unwarranted violence that may be directed toward them. It is our responsibility as public officers to make an arrest while simultaneously protecting the accused from any harmful activities that may have an impact on the court process. Next topic is the 1987 Philippine Constitution, and the mode of reflection that I am adopted is the microscope. In all criminal prosecutions, the accused shall be presumed innocent until the contrary is proved. This particular passage originates from Section 14 of the Constitution of the Philippines, dated 1987. In point of fact, the accused enjoys a greater number of rights than the victims. A different name of this concept is presumption of innocence. Although this is a possibility that a certain person is the most obvious suspect in this case, that fact does not change the fact that he is deemed innocent so long as the prosecution has not shown any change the fact that he is deemed. This pertains to the existence of reliable evidence that can be used against the suspect. The prosecution or the person that was wrong must at all costs provide evidence to the court that will convince the judge to condemn the suspect, and the proof must establish the suspect's guilt beyond a shadow of a doubt. That's all. Thank you.